What's going on, everybody? Marvel the Cross 316 back with another comic book flashback. And today, folks, we are looking at Daredevil issue number 19. This issue came out in June of 1966, and the cover date is August of 1966. And we are continuing this story here where Foggy Nelson is pretending to be Daredevil, and we're going to see in this issue that the real Daredevil, Matt Murdock, is going to come to the defense of Foggy Nelson. And so we have a pretty cool cover here. We have the Gladiator making another appearance and the Masked Marauder, who we haven't seen in quite a while, alone against the underworld. And so let's go ahead and get started. But before we get started, we got to give credit where credit is due. This issue is brought to you by Stan the Man Lee, who wrote this issue. We have John Romita Sr. on the artwork. We have the inking by Frank Giashoa and the lettering by Sam Rosen. And so now let's dive into today's story and see what our man without fear is doing in this issue. We see that Daredevil is jogging around town thinking about how he has to cope with Foggy Nelson, pretending that he is Daredevil, when all along we know that Matt Murdock is Daredevil. And Foggy Nelson is doing this for a reason, and that reason is to win the affections of Karen Page. If you haven't been paying attention for the past couple of issues, Foggy Nelson has developed a big crush on Karen Page. She works with Matt Murdock and Foggy Nelson in their law office, and she's the secretary. And Foggy Nelson has developed feelings for her. And so in the last issue, we saw that Foggy Nelson, he bought a Daredevil costume, pretended to be Daredevil, and got into a lot of trouble as the Gladiator came on the scene. Now we see Daredevil has to save this guy from slipping and falling as the scaffolding cable snaps in two. And we see here that Daredevil is going to save him. The crowd's cheering. They're saying, wow, he rescued him, and he's already going to find the Gladiator, and he just pretty much beat the Gladiator hands down. And so we see Foggy Nelson's like, who the heck is at the window? It is Daredevil. Daredevil was trying to sneak in to his office to change back to Matt Murdock, but Foggy Nelson was there at the office. Daredevil is going to tell Foggy the big news, and the news is that the Daily Bugle has printed a front page cover of Foggy Nelson here. Foggy Nelson, the prominent attorney said to be Daredevil, and now Foggy Nelson starts to freak out here because now he's in big trouble because all of Daredevil's villains are now going to go after Foggy because they think Foggy Nelson is Daredevil. Last issue we saw the defeat of Gladiator here, and we're going to see something very peculiar happen here. As these newspapermen come up, they want to take some pictures of him, but they put on these gas masks, and these are not ordinary cameras, folks. Instead, they are tear gas, and they just start spraying tear gas all over the place, and it allows the Gladiator to escape here. Gladiator doesn't know who has come to rescue him. He just gets in this car, and they're going to drive him to the location of their boss. And when he gets there, he's going to find out that the real identity is the Masked Marauder. We still don't know exactly who this Masked Marauder is, the identity of the true Masked Marauder, but we do know for a fact that he was defeated by Daredevil, and he wants revenge, as well as the Gladiator. And so we're going to see that the real reason why the Gladiator has rescued, or rather the Masked Marauder has rescued the Gladiator, is because he wants to join forces with him to defeat Daredevil. But we see that the Gladiator is not much of a person to work well with others. He wants to be the main boss instead. So the Masked Marauder uses his eye beams here, and it stuns him just for a little while. Meanwhile, we see Daredevil Says, look, I got to go look for the gladiator. He has escaped prison. You stay here and just try to be safe. And we see Foggy Nelson's like, wow, my life's in danger now. And it's all because I was a fool trying to win the affections of Karen. We see that there's reporters all over the place asking Karen Page if she knows anything about Foggy Nelson being Daredevil. She has no idea. She says she's confused. But we see that Daredevil's going to try one location to try to find the Gladiator. If you don't recall, the Gladiator used to be a costume designer. He would make these accurate depictions of superheroes and villains, but he's nowhere to be seen because that's why. The reason why is because he's with the Masked Marauder. We're going to soon see that the Masked Marauder is going to send out the men to go to Franklin Nelson's apartment, Foggy Nelson's apartment, and attack him. And the Gladiator is going to recover from the Masked Marauder's attack, puts on his helmet, and attacks the Masked Marauder. He says, you miserable person, I'm going to attack you for doing that to me, and I'm going to be in charge. And I mean, he gives a big old whooping to the Masked Marauder here, as we soon see. Masked Marauder's like, you fool, you're going to pay for that. And we see here that the Masked Marauder is going to try to fight back here. Meanwhile, the Masked Marauder's men arrive at Foggy Nelson's apartment here. They act like they're reporters. Foggy Nelson doesn't let them in. They barge in. And this is the best part of the issue. Daredevil comes careening through that window. They're like, huh? There's two Daredevil. Because they think that Daredevil is Foggy Nelson. And we see some great action drawn by the great John Romita Sr. here. And I'll just let y'all look at some of this action scenes here. I mean, this is the best part of the issue, in my opinion, of the story, where Daredevil is just licking the ground. I mean, just beating these guys to a pulp here. And we see that Foggy Nelson is going to save Daredevil here by stopping this gunman here, and then Daredevil just continues to fight these guys. And Foggy Nelson's like, wow, I can still hardly believe it. You beat them all single-handed, and you made it look so easy, just like you were only kidding around. And so Foggy Nelson has learned that it's not good to masquerade as a superhero when you don't have the abilities, supernatural abilities of a superhero. And so finally, the guy that had escaped comes back to the Masked Marauder and the Gladiator, reveals the big news that Franklin Nelson is not Daredevil, that they've been led astray this entire time, and that the real Daredevil showed up and defeated all of the Masked Marauder's men. The Masked Marauder gets mad at Gladiator because instead of them fighting, they could have been together and they could have fought the real Daredevil. And so now we're going to leave at that note here with the Masked Marauder and Gladiator finally coming to an agreement that they need to team up together and stop Daredevil that way. Meanwhile, we're going to end the issue on a high note. We see that Foggy Nelson's name has been cleared in the newspapers and the radio, declaring that Franklin Foggy Nelson is definitely not the mysterious Daredevil, and Karen Page couldn't be happier. Foggy thinks that Karen Page is going to be mad at him for pretending to be Daredevil, but instead she gives him a kiss on the cheek, says that she's happy that he's safe and sound, and we see through Matt Murdock's supersonic hearing here that he overhears Karen Page says that she thinks that Matt Murdock is the most gorgeous guy ever that she's ever met. And so she still has some feelings for Matt Murdock. And he's like, super sensitive hearing, I love you. And so Matt Murdock comes into the office. He acts like he didn't hear what Karen Page said. Karen tells Matt Murdock the good news that Franklin Nelson is not Daredevil. And I think all three are relieved that Foggy Nelson is not Daredevil. And so that's how we end this issue. Coming up next, we have The Trap. That's going to be occurring in issue number 20 of Daredevil as we look at issue number 20. But before we look at issue number 20, go ahead now and drop a like on this video. That would be much appreciated. Comment down below, what do you think will happen up next? Will Daredevil have a hard time fighting both the Gladiator and the Masked Marauder? I'd like to hear what your predictions are coming up in the next issue. And if you have not already, subscribe, and I will see y'all in the next one.